Hello and welcome. My name is David Riklan. I am the founder of selfgrowth.com and the co-creator of the Joint Venture Directory. Today I have an amazing guest, Philip Auerbach. Hello, Philip.
Hello, David. How amazing I am, I don't know, but we will see.
Time will tell. Excited to have you here. We're going to be discussing how to profit from the massive non-English speaking world. Very, very important for business owners. Before we get started, I just want to take a couple of minutes and share some information about Philip's background. Philip Auerbach is a social communication specialist. He has lived in or explored over 55 countries, has studied 8 languages, and has an international marketing MBA. Philip empowers people to communicate their value on the national and world stage. This mission obviously doesn't apply to everyone, but it'll hopefully apply to everybody listening here. But everyone can remember that only 28% of the world speaks English, and 60% of the world internet users will only buy from companies that present information in their own language. Very, very important. Philip's firm helps people, helps small companies, helps small and large companies profit from these often neglected opportunities. And we'll be getting into this. And for years, for over 30 years, he's been the president of Auerbach International, which helps market people's offerings abroad and which converts their websites, videos, books, courses, and documentations into over 120 languages. And for those that have any kind of product or service that you want to translate, we're going to get into some of the details of what's entailed in this, but I want to give you a website to go to right now so you can make sure to check this out later. And it's literally his name. And it's Philip, I mentioned it's Auerbach. So the website is www.auerbach, and that's spelled AUERBACH dash INTL for international. So if you can jot this down for later, www.auerbach-intl.com. You're going to want to check it out and get more information. But let's jump in right now. So we're talking about this big world, non-English speaking. What are some of the direct benefits of people converting their books, websites, videos, and content into these other languages? Let's jump right in.
Thank you, David. It's a great question. The first benefit, of course, is that people establish their credibility in the outside world, as I'll call it, the non-English world. And of course, first by establishing credibility is how they start to gain exposure for themselves and their brands, whatever their brands or their companies may be. And that leads to other benefits, such as potentially speaking engagements, podcast invitations in other countries or languages, and consulting assignments, obviously depending on what the subject is. And the first fear that arises, or the first question that arises is, well, I don't speak other languages. What do I do? How can I possibly get a podcast in another language or consult in another language and so forth? Don't worry, we've been in business 30 years. We've answered that question also. And the answer is interpreters. So translation is converting anything written. Interpreting is converting anything spoken. And we can provide interpreters both on site, by Zoom, or by telephone 24/7 in over 120 languages. And I should also point out that in addition to the 72% of the world that does not speak English, about 42 million US Latinos speak Spanish at home. So that's an enormous market right here domestically. And if people are ignoring that, again, they are ignoring an enormous revenue stream. And both the international markets and the domestic Spanish market or other ethnic markets can be an enormous revenue stream, a secondary or tertiary or important revenue stream. So, if the US market declines, there can be other revenue streams coming in.
What's interesting, and one of the things I want to point out to people relative, so I've had stuff sold overseas, and we've had I had a book one of the books I did translated. The overseas or the non-English speaking world is massive. And I've seen some cases where you have a product or service or something that you're sharing that might have a lot of competition in the United States, in the English speaking world, but there's not that much competition for it in the non-English speaking world. that what you have might be even more unique. So not only can this open you up to a whole nother market, but it could open you up to a market that in some cases isn't as competitive as the English speaking market. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Yes, that's very true. There's massive competition in the US, but of course, we've got a massive population. Most countries, of course, are less populated, and therefore there's less competition. And also, very often the offering that Americans bring is, it may not be unique, but it's often unusual, let's say, in other parts of the world, or less common in other parts of the world. So again, that opens up opportunities that uh, opportunities abroad or opportunities in the non-English world that may not exist here.
Uh, Makes total sense. All right. One of the things I've been hearing in terms of response for this, I'm finding there are people that are aware of this, people that are aware of this market and kind of dabbled in it. And one of the things I've found is that people assume I'll just go to Google Translate. Or I'll use some AI program and we'll just do a quick translation and that's adequate and that will do the work. Will these work? What's your take on all that?
Well, the nice thing to know is that during our 33 years of being in business, Google has come to us for its own language translations. So that to me is very wonderful and amusing. Um, so any AI program, artificial intelligence program, um, is only as good as its past collection of data. And each AI program differs in terms of how effective it is. But all of them make mistakes. None of them is perfect by any means. One thinks that Spanish is the most common language in which to translate, and therefore the most common AI program to use. But even Spanish does make mistakes. So, for example, we translated a book recently where it was about marketing, and there was a line in it that said, "Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Are you ready to rock and roll?" And the AI program translated it literally. ¿Eres listo para el rock and roll? Literally, are you ready to rock and roll? Well, there's no word rock, so rock and roll is an expression. And
Mhm.
instead of translating the meaning of the expression,
Right.
it translated just used the words rock and roll, which makes absolutely no sense. So this is an example of when we had to go back using human professional linguists to do this, to do the second phase of translations, to do it accurately, which is again to review everything and to effectively to do it right, to edit an AI version to ensure that it's done correctly. So in AI, you can either get translations done or you can get them done correctly. AI will do them, but it is always fraught with mistakes. And to do it correctly, you need to do another method. And the other issue, by the way, is AI does not convert measurements. So say English into metric.
Hmm.
It does not usually convey nuances or expressions, does some but not all. And it absolutely certainly does not do any cultural adaptation. So again, just as the example rock and roll, we had to translate it into another way to convey that expression. Um, so, and I guess finally the major point is that if you're going to rely on AI to communicate your image or your message, and AI is not perfect, that means that it's a second-rate translation. And do you want your prospects or your customers to think that you yourself are second-rate, or do you want to create a first-rate image by doing it correctly?
Well, what's powerful about that is it's a big differentiator because it's a difference between someone seeing it, it's obvious that it's riddled with mistakes, and some small, some big, versus seeing that you put the time and effort to really provide quality translation that's very specific. So it makes a lot of sense. And I want to talk a little bit about AI. So, AI, the concept of AI has been around like 20 plus years. I remember, when we first started talking about it. AI is pretty young Well, where have you been using? So I know this concept's been around for a long time, for like as I said, 20 years. Where does it kind of fit in? Where have you seen it fit in over the time, over the course of the times you've been using it?
Well, most people think of AI currently as something like ChatGPT, or they're thinking that AI is something fairly new.
Right.
We've been using a form of AI for over 20 years in our 33 years, probably longer than that. It's just gone under different names. So people may know the name of they may call it translation software. In
Right.
the language business, it's called machine translation. It's the same basic premise. And we've been using this method for, again, for over, well, since AI started in the language business, which was at least 20 years ago. And
Hmm.
we've always been using a combination of AI with master's level professional linguists to make sure, to ensure perfection and to guarantee accuracy.
Right. Oh, I know you mentioned earlier that using translators, interpreters. When you say that she's translators, interpreters are professionally trained, what exactly does that mean? What kind of quality? What's happening?
So unlike other companies, we select translators based on four primary criteria. They must have master's degrees or equivalents in their native, basically in their native language. So master's degrees in the art of translating or interpreting. And that means we do not use amateurs, we don't use language professors, or we don't use your cousin or your friend who used to live abroad. Um, these people must work into their native language only. So that means they must know nuances, they must know expressions, and they have to know how to culturally adapt the concepts very well. And that's very, very key. They must have at least 10 years ongoing continual experience as translators, as interpreters, which means we do not use part-timers. And most importantly, they must have expertise in the subject terminology of whatever it is we're translating. So if you give us something about mindset, about health, about business, about metaphysics, whatever the case may be, we must select a translation team, or at least professional translator, who speaks that terminology in his
Hmm.
or her uh, native language, and therefore the target language, the language it's going into for you. And this hybrid method of AI plus professional linguists is how we guarantee accuracy in the 120 languages that we handle.
Well, what I like about it, first, it makes total sense if you want to have quality, want quality translations. And the second is it's kind of the best of both worlds because you guys are effectively using the tools already, and then you're just adding whatever's necessary to kind of make it professional by using your professional linguists and professional editing, professional proofreading. So let me just a quick reminder for folks. So if you have any sort of product or service or course or anything, or you're looking to do training or anything where you need translation services or anything along those lines, you want to go, the easiest way is to go to the website. You want to give out the website one more time and kind of spell it out for folks?
Yes, it's auerbach-intl.com. So that's, I'll spell it in words, Apple, Uncle, Edward, Robert, Boy, Apple, Charlie, Hotel, hyphen, India, Nancy, Tom, Larry.com.
Okay. Our backdash INTL for obviously for international.com. And when people come to the website, I know you have a lot of information there. Should people fill out a form? Should they contact you if they're interested in working? How do you want people to contact you?
There are two ways. First of all, there's an ancient device that works quite effectively for communication. It's called a telephone. And we do like telephones. We'd be delighted to talk to people. Just feel free to call. It will give you an extension to, for a quote or something, just use that extension. People will get me directly or one of our project managers. Um, and if they don't want to talk, they can fill out a form on the very upper right. There's a little link called Get Quote, and you very, very simply fill out the form. And please provide your what's called the source file, your book, your video, whatever it may be, so that we can analyze it. Um, fees in the language business are based on the number of words as well as the target language, the language it's going into. But we also need to see whether, for example, any layout is required, any special if there are graphs or charts or anything special that we need to consider, and also whether the name will work. This is another consideration that people usually don't think of. But if you've got a book name or a book title or a company name, for example, and it's translated into other languages, it may not work properly, and it may create both humorous mistakes or gaffes that obviously may make you look foolish. And
Sure.
obviously that's something we want to avoid. So we can advise about that as well.
Okay, makes total sense. Anything else to add before we finish up today?
Yes, two major points. We also have a global marketing division of our company, so we can potentially identify promising markets that people can enter, countries to be entered. And you mentioned, for example, about competition in the very beginning. So again, it may be very competitive here, but maybe abroad it's not as much.
Sure.
And we can also advise the strategies to enter those markets. And then finally, the world out there is both expansive and potentially frightening. We take the fear out of it in many ways, but as a reminder that it can also be extremely lucrative, bring you great benefits of both exposure and credibility, and also bring additional revenue streams for you. So again, to ignore it can be a huge missed opportunity.
All right. Well, Philip, thank you for sharing this information. I want everybody to really think seriously. If you have a product or service, online product, anything along the lines that you think is accessible and would be valuable to the non-English speaking world, you want to check out the services, Auerbach-intl.com. Check out what they're doing. And Philip, thanks for joining us here and sharing information today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. And I want to thank everybody for listening today and wish you best success with your business. Talk to everybody soon.
Thank you.